Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of GCC Wisdom on GCC Pulse. I'm really excited today to have an executive who has deep experience at iconic companies like GE, Novartis, and Cargill. Please welcome Fred Simoes. Fred, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Atul.
One of the things we're noticing in the market is this rise in new GCCs being set up. And so when you think about a company setting up their first GCC, what should they get right? And what is the most common mistake you see that happens in year one?
First, I would say I would love to have a shot at setting up GCCs as a fresh starter, again, with all of the learnings. But if I can share some of it, I think there's three things really that I try to remind myself is the first one is fall in love with the problem you're trying to solve for the corporation.
Yeah.
The second one is you need to be clear about the operating model that you choose and why you choose that particular operating model. Avoid recreating the existing enterprise silos, right? It's again a fresh start. So on the first one, on fall in love with the problem you're trying to solve for the company, too many usually end up making the center as the objective, right? Building it up. No, you're there to solve something for the company. Is it cost competitiveness? Is it talent access? Is it accelerating innovation? Is it speed? Whatever, right? But fall in love with the problem is my number one. The second, on the operating model, I think it's interesting. At Cargill, I'm advocating for a model that is completely different than what I was advocating at Novartis. And it's just because the environment is different, the culture is different, the objective that we're trying to achieve is different. And to me, any model can work in the right environment, right? Yeah. And so that's the second big one, like being very intentional about the operating model that you choose and why you think it's going to work within your enterprise and your culture. And then the existing silos, not replicating that is really the chance to organize your teams along workflows, end-to-end processes, things that today I'm spending hours and hours trying to figure out how do I solve for this. Yeah. You have the chance of setting it up right from the beginning.
That would be great advice also when you're thinking about new AI projects, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So Fred, you've seen a lot of different models, right? And you choose to do things differently because all the learnings. Talk to us about where you are seeing measurable enterprise value that boards really appreciate, not just efficiency metrics.
To me, there's plenty of examples out there of GBSs and GCCs creating more than cost and productivity improvements. If you look at how GBSs are identifying new opportunities that align with the company's strategy and drive business outcomes instead of just productivity. So you have examples that I've lived myself at Cargill or I've seen from other companies where GBS organizations accelerate revenue cycles by being faster at quote to billing. And for Cargill, just 1 day improvement in my ability to bill is a huge impact on my cash flow, right? And so that's one thing that the boards are particularly interested in. All of the working capital, how we also improve profitable growth for the company. I love GCCs that talk about applying credit to the portfolio of customers in a way that goes to the customers that are the fastest growing, highest margin. Not only thinking about, hey, I have a request to provide credit terms, right? And I have a turnaround time of 2 days to respond to that, right? That's old style, which is like the KPI versus, hey, I'm actually helping the business become a faster growing and higher margin business. So these are some of the interesting ones. I think at Cargill also, we've been particularly successful at looking at leveraging our centers to accelerate how we do M&A, divestitures, and so on. I think that's another space where we don't always think about that is particularly interesting. Yeah.
Those are such great examples that I love promoting this, Fred, because it makes the point very clearly that this is not just the labor arbitrage story. So thank you for sharing that. So Fred, when you're looking at AI across the industry, when you look at GBSs particularly, are you seeing areas where AI is actually changing outcomes? And it's not just where leaders are confusing experimentation with impact?
That's a good one. I think, we've moved on from AI as use cases or pilots, and we're making this more platform decisions for GBSs and GCCs. Areas where I've seen AI really changing outcomes. One area that I particularly like is AI in the space of forecasting, so mostly for finance and FP&A functions, where instead of turning budgets into negotiated settlements type things, you actually discuss what needs to be true to hit an AI-generated forecast, right? And so the dialogue is more about the opportunities are out there rather than just negotiating. So that I love because it touches also the culture of how you do the work. Then there's plenty of areas where just our human brain can't deal with so much data. So pattern recognition combined with nudges where you say, hey, have you noticed, for example, this transaction that happened in your books, to identify one-offs before the month end versus the traditional way, which is you have a forecast and you have a variance and then you drill to figure out what happened and then you explain that you had a one-off, where with technology you can now address that much earlier. For us also at Cargill, AI has been particularly helpful in areas where we have document-heavy processes.
Yeah.
So like invoices, POs, contracts. And frankly, I was floored by the results on accuracy of OCR with AI-enabled solutions, which by far outperforms any role-based type automation that we tried to do before. Yeah. So yeah, tons of really interesting examples. I think the noise usually comes from areas where you're just doing, again, pilots, ungoverned agents, like that's your classic example. Yeah. And you don't have integration, you don't have policy, you don't think about your process. So you have very clever demos, right? But you don't have like impact on the scale that you need to generate for this to be noticeable at enterprise level.
So Fred, with so much going on, right? If a GBS leader were to start today, what is the first decision they know that they must get right because it cannot be reversed? Yeah. And along with that, I want to add one more. And what do you think is the hardest mistake to recover from?
I think the decision, right? I'll go back to the operating model. Again, it's going to define your success, the alignment to the culture of the company and the objectives that trigger the creation of your GBS. Yeah. And I would tie it immediately also to your funding model. With so much happening, as you said, I think you need to know what is going to be your run budget, what you're going to try to optimize, and then what is your change budget, and how you can drive some of these innovation and improving experience and so on. Because without this, you end up with all of the vetoes and hidden friction that's going to slow down everything and prevent you from showing value to the corporation. Yeah. On the mistake to avoid, maybe one that I'm struggling with right now, because basically I inherited an organization that had a certain perception within the company. So for me, I would say biggest mistake is do not brand yourself. I'm doing the same, but cheaper. Because if you do, you lose that right to redesign processes, to leverage data for insight, to influence experience. You become like, as you said before, right? The cheap labor cost takeout engine for the company, rather than just positioning yourself as a strategic capability. And frankly, to me, you need to show from day one that the work can be done better, more fit for purpose, more digital, more insight driven. And frankly, recovering from that is super difficult. And if you don't set it up right from the beginning, it's hundreds of people that whose perception you need to change, right?
So Fred, I think, you said many things that are great takeaways. The one easy one that I just want to reinforce is you said run budget, change budget. I think too often GBS leaders get stuck with a run budget, don't have a change budget. And so then they lack innovation and people wonder why we're not getting more. So I think that's a good takeaway. So Fred, my final question, what's one belief about GBS, kind of a learning or a practice or principle that you think GBS leaders must unlearn so they can stay relevant over the next few years?
I'm going to tell you an anecdote. So when I took on my role leading our centers, I interviewed about 60 business and functional leaders. And one of the things I heard consistently from them was, your SLAs and your KPIs don't mean anything to me. They don't matter to my business. And so I think one of the biggest beliefs we must unlearn is the idea that standardization is the ultimate goal. That GBS success is defined by the lowest cost per transaction possible, right? Ultimately, what you want to align on with your businesses and your partners is how to focus on common business outcomes, KPIs, right? And those are really the important ones where you start creating value for the enterprise and collaborating towards these objectives. The The challenge to me is that, especially now with technologies, the rigid standardization now slows us down, right? To me, the rule is simple: is unnecessary variation is waste. Smart variation creates value, right? And so where do you bring variation, and where do you go for standard? And making these choices is super important. And variation is not the evil, especially now with modern AI and analytics, where you can make personalization much easier. You can handle exceptions much more easily than you used in the past. You can personalize experience much more easily. So standardization is not the ultimate goal for GBS. Is the one thing I would mention.
So I would end with what you just said. Smart variation is where you create value. Fred, thank you so much for this conversation. I look forward to having you back again.
Thank you, Atul. A pleasure.